And then we've got one more coaching rumor at this point because James Borrego was in the mix for the Lakers job and for the Cavs job. I'm going to ask you this, Scott, because now it's rumored James Borrego is going to be the assistant for the Detroit Pistons, not the assistant, the head coach for the Detroit Pistons.
Mhm.
Can I tell the truth to the people on this situation?
I'm,
Should I
I'm,
let
I'm
them
listening.
know?
That's who you are, Mo. So I'm ready for the truth,
Now,
for
this
your
is the
truth.
reason why earlier in the show I compared coaching in the NBA to Game of Thrones. Because oftentimes it's not about the kind of coach, right? And I'm not discrediting James Borrego or any of these coaches in this
Yeah,
manner,
and I
but
work with James Borrego in Orlando, so I know James Borrego.
he's a
Good
very
man.
talented coach, right?
Yeah, good man.
However,
Good man.
a lot
Yes.
of these decisions are based
Mhm.
upon who you're friends with and who your allies are in the NBA. And if you look at what the Pistons, if they do go with James Borrego, who is an assistant in New Orleans, hired
Mhm.
by Trajan Langdon, who recently
Yep.
became the president of the Detroit Pistons organization, who just happened to be represented by Arn Tellem, who is the vice president, or was it vice chief executive of the
Vice chair,
Pistons organization? Vice
vice
chairman.
chair.
Okay,
Yeah,
there we
you're
go.
right. Yes.
But you
Okay.
can see how in
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, how it's all family trees. You can see the same thing happening in the NBA with agencies and with friendships and relationships just like that. So, for the Detroit Pistons, I don't know how things are going to go. I know that there were certainly better candidates they could have hired for their president of basketball operations job. One of them might be on the show with me right now. And I feel like they might have had, a better job at recruiting, maybe a coach that fits this roster better rather than someone that they've just worked with before or someone that they're friends with. So that's what I will say on the Detroit Pistons. But Scott, from your perspective, having worked with James Borrego, what would he bring to that roster if he was made their head coach?
First of all, let me add a comment to what you just said because I know it's very important. I shouldn't even say I think, I know it is. See, when you're in the position of leading a franchise, whether, we're talking ownership, presidents, GMs, coaches, head coaches, whomever, whatever leadership role you're in, you've got to make decisions that are best, that you firmly believe are best for the betterment of the organization. And it can't take into account personal relationships, nepotism or anything of that nature. You got to do what's best for the organization. I've always believed that. And the organizations that do that, you see continuously win. Now, if they happen to align on a couple of occasions, fantastic. But if that is your guiding light, then I have not seen that be overly successful, whether we're talking about the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. You're going to make decisions on when you're talking about adding talent, players, coaches, executives to your team. It's got to be based on who are the good performers and who can do the best at their job. So I just wanted to add to that because I really
Absolutely.
get
Absolutely.
what you said. Now, James Borrego coming to Detroit. He was as a I worked with him. Actually became our interim coach for a short time in Orlando. Did a nice job with a young team. Very even keel personality, and so that not knowing the players very well in the Detroit locker room, he will be able to come in. He'll be very approachable. He'll have a way that he wants to play. He has a certain level of patience that I think that's required to play with this young group. Now, the key is going to be, and here's what I know about being in the Detroit community: can he connect as a head coach to what people in Detroit see as what being a Detroit Pistons is all about? A lot of that's toughness, defense, and James Borrego is a really good offensive coach. And he understands that defense is important, and that will be a big part of it. So it'll be if he ends up with the job, there's a lot to turn around, not only in the locker room, but from a perception standpoint in the entire community. So it's a heavy lift to ask any coach to be honest with you. but how he's going to connect not only with that locker room. If it's him or whoever the coach would be, you not only got to connect with that locker room to develop a team that can show signs of winning. Now I know I hear them talking about, oh, well, we're still building or whatever the case may be. What I know about that community, yeah, it's important to sell a plan and a vision, but you got to win there if you want people to come out,
Mhm.
especially when you're talking
And
about Detroit basketball.
would it
So
be fair for you to say that teams take on the personality of the head coach?
oh, I think it's very fair. It's you can say that about your best player and your head coach. You've got to. I've always been a firm believer in that teams that are successful have a true identity. And we've talked a lot of this about this on the show. I think nobody's done it better than the Miami Heat year in and year out. They take on the identity. Obviously Pat Riley's at the top of the chain, but Eric Spoelstra as a coach who's really an extension of Pat Riley, they are terrific at that. They have stated this is who we are, and every day they coach to it, they practice to it, they trade to it, they communicate to the fan base. This is who we are, and it's so consistent that that's why it's been so sustainable. And you're remiss if you don't mention the Miami Heat being involved in any conversation in terms of being a good team for the upcoming season, because they are that consistent and they're true. They have a true culture and identity. So that's going to be extremely important there in Detroit, because obviously over the past decade they have not exhibited that at all. There is no identity, and I can tell you firmly, having been in Detroit when we were really good during that decade from 2000 to 2011, 12, that we definitely had an identity that represented the city of Detroit, and they haven't done anything remotely like that since.
Yeah, they're lacking in the toughness of those. When you think of the Detroit Pistons teams and everyone who's won in Detroit, it's just toughness is the only word that springs to mind. And right
Yes.
now, it's rumored that they're going to move Isaiah Stewart, and then after that, where's the toughness really coming from in that team? I don't.
It's hard to sell a finesse team in Detroit, Michigan. I can tell you that. I don't care whether it's hockey,
But I
football,
also
baseball,
think it is
basketball.
hard for a finesse team to win in the NBA.
I agree with that.
Like,
Oh, no question about it. No, there's no question about it. I
even
mean,
the Warriors, who people point to as a finesse team, they've got the biggest bully in the NBA on their roster.
right? Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they can be finesse because
Exactly.
they got Draymond Green
Exactly.
kicking everyone in the face if they try
That's
and
right.
mess with the Warriors. So it's like,
That's right. That's right.
its toughness is a prerequisite. And it just, like you gave the example of the Miami Heat, I think Ime Udoka is a great example of what he did in Houston last season. And they took on his personality. They got guys who fitted his personality, and Dylan Brooks and the likes.
Yeah. And Mo, you can appreciate this. Say what you want. Ime Udoka helped set this Celtics team on the path that obviously ultimately turned into a championship this year.
Yep.
How he came in the door and early on made him ruffle some feathers and all that, but he got those guys to buy into the importance of being a strong defensive team, strong-minded. They go to the finals that year in 2022, no question. And so I expect to see the same from this Houston team. You see a culture developing and emerging there, and they're going to be a team that is going to have to be reckoned with in the Western Conference.
Yep, and to his credit, Joe Mazzulla as well. He's got a different personality to Ime Udoka. He might not be so kind of loud and in your face with it, but Joe Mazzulla, I say it as a compliment, is a psychopath. Like the way he showed his players UFC fights before the game. He shows players. He sits down. I think he sat down with Jason Tatum and watched The Dark Knight to see how the Batman reacts to the Joker, and the team took on his personality this season.
Give him credit, and I would say this to any aspiring coach: you have to be true to who you are as a person. You can take certain strategies and tidbits from certain coaches, but you can't try to become that personality. So, to go back and, if you look now, you talk about Ime. Joe Mazzulla is not Ime the person. So he didn't try to do what Ime did to be the Ime the person. He stayed true to his personality, which is huge. I've seen, I can go back in my time years ago coaching in college when a lot of guys as college coaches, especially who had worked with Bobby Knight, when they got their opportunity to be a head coach, tried to emulate Bobby Knight and all of those different things he did. That worked for him. That wasn't going to work for them as well. It's not authentic. That was authentically Bobby Knight.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't mean to digress on that, but it's a big thing to me because players are very, very smart and they know if you're being somebody other than yourself and who you really are. So
it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the mess of the Detroit Pistons moving forward.